The sound of metal hitting metal echoed through Minho Kim's repair shop as he worked on the engine of a cargo hauler. Sweat dripped from his forehead despite the cool evening air flowing through the open bay doors. The twin moons of Kepler 442b cast pale light across the workshop floor, mixing with the bright glow of his work lamps. Minho loved these quiet hours after the colony settled down for the night. No customers asking when their ships would be ready. No suppliers calling about late deliveries. Just him, his tools, and the satisfying work of making broken things whole again. He was adjusting a fuel injector when the rumble of approaching engines made him look up. A battered transport shuttle was coming in for landing just outside his shop. The pilot was flying rough, engines sputtering like they needed a complete overhaul. The shuttle touched down with a heavy thud that shook, dust from the ceiling beams. Minho wiped his hands on his coveralls and stepped outside to see what the pilot needed. Maybe they had engine trouble and needed emergency repairs. The shuttle door opened with a grinding sound that made Minho wince. A large figure stepped out, and Minho recognized the species immediately: Centaurian. They were known throughout the galaxy as traders who would haul anything for the right price, no questions asked. "You Kim?" the Centaurian asked in rough standard galactic. His voice was like gravel in a cement mixer. "That's me," Minho replied. "What can I do for you?" The Centaurian walked to the back of his shuttle and started unloading a metal shipping container. It was about the size of a small room with breathing holes punched in the sides. "Got a delivery for you." Minho frowned. "I didn't order anything." "Says here you did." The Centaurian pulled out a crumpled shipping manifest. "Minho Kim, New Sol Colony, Kepler 442b, Premium Companion Service. Paid in full." "There's been a mistake," Minho said, shaking his head. "I never ordered any companion service." The Centaurian shrugged his massive shoulders. "Not my problem. Contract says deliver to Minho Kim, so I'm delivering." He activated a small anti-gravity unit and pushed the container toward Minho's shop. "Where do you want it?" "I told you. I didn't order this. You need to take it back." "Can't do that. Already. Got paid for one-way transport." The Centaurian deactivated the anti-grav and let the container settle on the workshop floor with a dull thud. Besides, the buyer already rejected this one. Said it was damaged goods. "You want to make a complaint? Take it up with the service company." Minho felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean, damaged goods?" "How should I know? I just haul cargo." The Centaurian was already walking back to his shuttle. "Container code is on the side if you need to return it. Good luck with that." The shuttle engines fired up with a roar that scattered dust and small debris across the workshop. Within minutes, the Centaurian was gone, leaving Minho alone with a shipping container he never ordered. He walked around the container, looking for clues about what was inside. The shipping label was mostly in Centaurian script, but he could make out a few words in standard galactic: companion service, live cargo, handle with care. Live cargo. Minho grabbed a crowbar from his tool rack and started working on the container's locking mechanism. The locks were simple but sturdy, designed to keep the contents secure during transport. It took him several minutes to get them open. The first thing that hit him was the smell. Not terrible, but the stale air of someone who had been confined in a small space for too long. Then he saw movement in the shadows inside the container. "Hello?" he called softly. "Is someone in there?" A figure moved in the darkness, pressing against the far wall of the container. Minho grabbed a portable work light and shined it inside. She was definitely not human. Her skin had a pale blue tint and her hair was dark purple, almost black. She was thin, too thin, and her clothes were little more than rags. But it was her eyes that caught Minho's attention. They were large and intelligent, filled with fear and exhaustion. She spoke in a language he didn't recognize, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's okay," Minho said, keeping his voice calm and gentle. "I'm not going to hurt you." She seemed to understand his tone, even if she didn't know his words. She cautiously moved toward the opening, and Minho could see she was having trouble standing. "When did you last eat?" he asked, then realized she probably didn't understand standard galactic. Minho set down his tools and backed away from the container, giving her space. He went to his small office area and grabbed a bottle of water and an energy bar from his emergency supplies. When he returned, she had managed to climb out of the container and was sitting on his workshop floor, looking around, with wide eyes. She was definitely from one of the species he'd heard about but never met in person. Her features were delicate but strong, and despite her condition, she carried herself with a dignity that impressed him. He approached slowly and offered her the water. She looked at the bottle suspiciously for a moment, then took it with shaking hands. She drank carefully at first, then more eagerly when she realized it was clean water. The energy bar took more convincing, but hunger won out over caution. She ate it quickly like someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days. "What's your name?" Minho asked, pointing to himself. "Minho." She understood the gesture and pointed to herself. "Nara. Nara," he repeated, and she nodded. Minho's mind was racing. Someone had shipped this woman like cargo, and her supposed buyer had rejected her. The whole situation made him angry. No one deserved to be treated like a piece of merchandise. His comm unit beeped, and he saw a message from his neighbor, G1 Park. "Saw a shuttle land at your place, everything okay?" Minho looked at Nara, who was now examining his workshop with curious eyes. Despite everything she'd been through, she seemed interested in his tools and equipment. "Everything's fine," he typed. Back. Just a delivery. But as he watched Nara slowly explore his workshop, touching his tools with the careful hands of someone who understood machinery, Minho knew this was going to be anything but simple. The shipping manifest was still on his workbench. He picked it up and read it more carefully. The original destination had been crossed out and replaced with his name and address. Someone had made a mistake, or maybe someone had deliberately sent Nara to him. Either way, she was here now, and she needed help. The Centaurian had said her buyer rejected her, which meant she had nowhere to go. The companion service companies weren't known for their kindness to returned merchandise. Minho made a decision. He would figure out the legal complications later. Right now, Nara needed food, clean clothes, and a safe place to rest. "Come on," he said, gesturing toward the small living area he'd built behind his workshop. "Let's get you cleaned up and fed properly." Nara hesitated for a moment, then nodded. As she followed him through the workshop, Minho noticed she paused at several of his projects, studying them with the eye of someone who understood engineering. Maybe the shipping mistake wasn't such a bad thing after all. 3 days had passed since Nara arrived at Minho's workshop. Dr. Hyun Lee had come to check on her health and declared that she was malnourished but would recover with proper food and rest. Minho had given her clean clothes and set up a small room for her in the back of his shop. Nara was learning Standard Galactic quickly. She already knew some words, but now she was putting sentences together. Minho discovered she was much smarter than he had first thought. "Your machine is working too hard," Nara said on the third morning, pointing at the air recycling unit in the corner of the workshop. Minho looked up from the engine he was rebuilding. "What do you mean?" Nara walked over to the unit and touched the metal housing. "It fights against itself. The air moves in circles, but circles that fight each other. Very wasteful." "It's worked fine for 5 years," Minho said, but he was curious about what she meant. "May I show you?" Nara asked politely. Minho nodded and handed her a small screwdriver. He watched as she carefully opened the unit's control panel. Her movements were precise and confident, like someone who had worked with machines before. "See here," she said, pointing to a series of tubes inside the unit. "Air comes in, goes this way, then back again, like a river trying to flow uphill." Minho studied the design. The air recycling unit had been built by the colony's original engineers, and everyone assumed it was the best they could do with limited resources. "What would you do differently?" he asked. Nara smiled, the first real smile he had seen from her. "My people, the Villani, we understand flow. We build with the natural movement of things, not against it." She grabbed a piece of paper from Minho's desk and started drawing. Her hands moved quickly, sketching out a new design for the air recycling system. The tubes curved in smooth lines instead of sharp angles, and the fan placement was completely different. "This is stress flow engineering," she explained as she drew. "Instead of forcing air to move where we want it, we help it move where it wants to go. Much more efficient." Minho stared at the drawing. The design was elegant and simple, but it was unlike anything he had seen before. "This would really work better?" "Much better. Uses half the power, moves twice as much air, and the machine will last longer because it doesn't fight itself." Minho's young apprentice Taemin came into the workshop carrying coffee for everyone. He was 17 and had been working with Minho for 2 years learning the trade. "What are you two looking at?" Taemin asked, setting down the coffee cups. "Nara is showing me a new way to design air recycling systems," Minho said. Taemin looked at the drawing with interest. "This looks really different from what we usually build." "Different can be good," Minho said. He looked at Nara. "Where did you learn engineering?" Nara's expression became sad. "I was structural engineer on Velan Prime. I designed buildings and bridges before the mining companies came." "What happened to your planet?" Taemin asked. "Corporate mining destroyed the ecosystem, poisoned the water, killed the plants. My people had to leave or die." Nara's voice was quiet but steady. "Most of us became workers for other species. Some joined the military. Others went to the companion services." Minho felt anger rising in his chest. He had heard stories about corporate mining operations that destroyed entire worlds for profit, but he had never met someone who lived through it. "The companion services," he said carefully. "How did you end up there?" Nara was quiet for a long moment. "When you have no money, no home, no family left alive, you make choices you never thought you would make. The companion service promised food, shelter, and a chance to start over on a new world. But they treated you like cargo," Taemin said, his young voice filled with outrage. "Yes," Nara said simply. "They said I was damaged goods because I asked too many questions and knew too much about engineering. They said buyers wanted companions who were grateful and quiet, not ones who might be smarter than them." Minho set down his coffee cup harder than necessary. "That's horrible." "It is what it is," Nara said. "But now I am here and you have been kind to me. That is more than I expected." Over the next few days, Nara helped Minho around the workshop. She was quick to learn how human tools worked, and she had ideas for improving almost everything she saw. Her suggestions were always practical and often brilliant. She redesigned the exhaust system on a cargo hauler, making it 30% more efficient. She improved the power coupling on a passenger shuttle, reducing energy loss by half. Every change she made worked exactly as she predicted. Word began to spread through the colony. Jiwon Park stopped by the workshop to see what all the talk was about. "I heard you have a new assistant who's some kind of engineering genius," Jiwon said. "Nara knows things about machine design that we never learned," Minho replied. "She's teaching me about stress flow engineering." Jiwon watched Nara work on a damaged navigation computer. Her hands moved with practiced skill as she traced the circuit pathways and identified the problem. "This is very advanced work," Jiwon said quietly to Minho. "Where did she learn this?" "She was a professional engineer before her planet was destroyed," Minho explained. "The companion service told buyers she was damaged goods because she was too smart." Jiwon shook her head. "That's insane. She's obviously brilliant." "I know," Minho said. "But most people in the galaxy don't see the Vellani as engineers anymore. They see them as fallen warriors or cheap labor." "What do you see?" Jiwon asked. Minho watched Nara carefully remove a damaged circuit board from the navigation computer. She studied it for a moment, then began sketching modifications that would make it more reliable. "I see someone who understands machines better than anyone I've ever met," he said. "I see someone who can solve problems I didn't even know we had." That evening, Minho and Nara worked together to implement her new design for the air recycling system. The modifications required careful precision, but Nara guided him through each step. "Why do you trust my ideas?" Nara asked as they worked. "Because they work." Minho said, and because you explain them in ways that make sense. Most people think the Villani are finished as a species, Nara said. They think we have nothing left to offer. Most people are wrong, Minho replied. You've improved every machine you've touched since you got here. They finished the installation just as the colony's evening shift was ending. Minho activated the new system and watched the power consumption readings on his monitor. The improvement was immediate and dramatic. It's using 40% less power than the old system, he said with amazement. Nara smiled. And the air quality will be better too. The flow patterns distribute everything more evenly. As they cleaned up their tools, Minho realized something had changed in the past week. He no longer thought of Nara as someone who needed his help. She was becoming his partner, someone whose skills complemented his own. Tomorrow I want to show you the fusion reactor maintenance schedules, he said. I think you might have ideas about improving the efficiency cycles. Nara's eyes lit up with interest. I would like that very much. For the first time since arriving on Kepler 442b, Nara looked truly happy. She had found something she thought was lost forever, the chance to use her mind and skills to build something better. 2 weeks after Nara's arrival, Captain Rivera brought her damaged cargo ship to Minho's workshop. The ship had taken hits from space debris during a hyperspace jump, and the hull was twisted in several places. This is going to take at least a month to fix, Captain Rivera said, walking around her ship with a worried expression. The frame is bent, the power couplings are misaligned, and the cargo bay doors won't seal properly. Minho studied the damage carefully. It was the kind of repair job that required rebuilding major structural components. I can do it, but you're right about the time. Maybe 5 weeks if everything goes smoothly. Nara had been quietly examining the ship while they talked. Now she stepped forward. May I make a suggestion? Captain Rivera looked surprised. She was a tough woman who had been flying cargo ships for 20 years, and she wasn't used to getting advice from strangers. What kind of suggestion? She asked. The damage looks worse than it is, Nara said, pointing to the twisted hull sections. The metal is bent, not broken. With stress flow techniques, we can guide it back to its original shape without replacing entire sections. I've never heard of stress flow techniques, Captain Rivera said. It's Villani engineering, Minho explained. Nara has been teaching me about it. Instead of fighting the metal, you work with its natural properties. Nara walked over to one of the damaged hull sections and placed her hand on the twisted metal. This section wants to return to its original shape. The stress patterns are still there, just redirected. We can use heat and pressure in specific sequences to guide it back. Captain Rivera looked skeptical. And this would be faster than cutting out the damaged sections and welding in new ones? Much faster, Nara said confidently, and stronger too. The metal will remember its original form and resist future damage better. Minho trusted Nara's judgment. Over the past 2 weeks, every suggestion she had made had worked perfectly. What do you think, Captain? Want to let us try? Captain Rivera thought for a moment. How long would your method take? 1 week, Nara said. Maybe less. 1 week instead of 5? Captain Rivera's eyes widened. If you can really do that, I'll pay double your usual rate. Minho and Nara spent the next day planning their approach. Nara drew detailed diagrams showing how the stress patterns flowed through the damaged hull sections. She calculated the exact temperatures and pressures needed to guide the metal back to its original shape. This is like surgery, Minho said, as he studied her plans. You're not just fixing the damage, you're healing it. That is exactly right, Nara agreed. Villani engineering sees machines as living things that can be injured and healed. They started work the next morning. Nara guided Minho through the process, showing him how to read the stress patterns in the metal and how to apply heat and pressure in precise sequences. It was unlike anything he had ever done before. The work was slow and careful. Each section had to be treated individually, following the unique pattern of stresses created by the damage. But as they worked, Minho could see the hull sections slowly, returning to their original shapes. It's working, he said with amazement as the first section straightened out perfectly. Of course it is, Nara said with a smile. The metal wants to be whole again. We are just helping it remember how. Word spread quickly through the colony that something unusual was happening at Minho's workshop. Other mechanics came by to watch them work. Engineers from the colony's technical services department stopped by to ask questions. Taemin was fascinated by the new techniques. This is completely different from everything I learned in trade school, he said. Different is not always bad, Nara told him. Sometimes different is necessary. By the fourth day, they had repaired most of the structural damage. The hull sections looked better than new, and the ship's power systems were running more efficiently than before. Captain Rivera was amazed. I've never seen anything like this. The ship feels different, more solid somehow. The stress flow repairs make the hull stronger, Nara explained. It will resist damage better in the future. On the fifth day, they finished the repairs ahead of schedule. Captain Rivera ran full system diagnostics and found that every system was performing better than factory specifications. How is this possible, she asked. My ship is 20 years old, but these readings are better than when it was new. Stress flow engineering doesn't just fix problems, Nara said. It improves the natural flow of energy and forces through the system. Everything works better when it works with its natural patterns instead of against them. Captain Rivera paid them triple the normal rate and promised to tell other ship captains about their services. Within days, 3 more ships arrived requesting repairs using the new techniques, but success brought new problems. On the 7th day after Captain Rivera left, a formal transport shuttle landed outside the workshop. The passenger who stepped out was well-dressed and carried himself with the authority of someone used to being obeyed. I am Ambassador Thek of the Villani diplomatic mission, the visitor announced. I am here about the Villani female you are harboring. Minho felt his stomach drop. Harboring? The individual known as Nara, Ambassador Thek continued. She is still legally bound to the Galactic Companion Service under contract law. She must be returned immediately. Nara had come out of the workshop when she heard the shuttle arrive. When she saw Ambassador Thek, her face went pale. I know you, she said quietly. You signed the agreements that allowed the companion services to recruit on Velen Prime. I did what was necessary to help our people survive, Ambassador Thek replied. And now I am here to make sure contract law is followed. Jiwan Park arrived, within minutes of being called. As the colony's administrator, she had to deal with legal issues involving other species. What exactly is the legal situation? She asked Ambassador Thek. The female was purchased by a legitimate buyer through the Galactic Companion Service. When the buyer rejected the merchandise, she became the property of the service company until alternative arrangements could be made. Merchandise? Minho said angrily. She's a person, not a piece of cargo. Human colonial law may see it that way, Ambassador Thek said. But the contract was signed in neutral space under Galactic Commercial Code. She is legally bound property until her debt is paid. What debt? Jiwan asked. Transport costs, processing fees, medical care, housing during training period. The total comes to approximately 50,000 galactic credits. Minho felt like he had been punched in the stomach. 50,000 credits was more than his workshop made in 2 years. And if the debt isn't paid? Jiwan asked. She returns to the service company for reassignment to another buyer. Nara spoke for the first time since Ambassador Thek had explained the situation. How much time do we have? Standard collection procedures allow 14 standard days for debt resolution, Ambassador Thek said. After the ambassador left, Minho, Nara, and Jiwan sat in the workshop trying to figure out what to do. 50,000 credits, Jiwan said, shaking her head. The entire colony doesn't have that much in reserve funds. There has to be another way, Minho said. Nara was quiet for a long time. Finally, she spoke. There is another way, but it would be a big risk. What do you mean? Minho asked. We could prove that I am worth more as a free person than as bound property. If we can show that my engineering knowledge has significant commercial value, we might be able to negotiate. Minho thought about the ship repairs they had completed, the improved efficiency of every system Nara had worked on. And the interest from other mechanics and engineers. The engine design, he said suddenly. The hybrid human Villani engine design we've been working on. If we can prove it works, it might be worth enough to buy your freedom. Nara nodded. But we would need to build a working prototype in 14 days, and we would need to prove it works better than anything currently available. Minho looked around his workshop, filled with tools and half-finished projects. 2 weeks to build something that could change both their lives. Then we better get started, he said. Minho had an idea that surprised everyone, including himself. On the 3rd day of working on the engine prototype, he made a suggestion that changed everything. What if we got married? He said during their lunch break. Nara almost choked on her sandwich. What? Think about it, Minho said, his mind racing. If you're married to a human citizen, you automatically get citizenship rights under human colonial law. The companion service contract would be void because human law doesn't recognize slavery or bonded labor. Jiwan had stopped by to check on their progress and overheard the conversation. That's actually not a bad idea, she said. Human colonial law does take precedence over commercial contracts when it comes to basic human rights. But I'm not human, Nara pointed out. Doesn't matter, Jiwan explained. The marriage would make you a colonial citizen with full rights. The companion service would have no legal claim on you. Nara was quiet for a long moment. You would do that for me? Marry me just to save me from the companion service? Minho realized his suggestion might sound like he was just trying to solve a legal problem. It wouldn't be just a legal arrangement. He said carefully. I mean, we work well together, we understand each other, and I care about what happens to you. But marriage is supposed to be about love, Nara said. Maybe love is different things to different people, Minho replied. Maybe it's about respect and partnership and building something good together. Nara looked around the workshop, at the projects they had completed together, at the engine prototype they were building. You really think we could make it work? I think we already are making it work, Minho said. The wedding was planned for the following week. Minho's cousin Yuna Kim was the colony chaplain, and she agreed to perform the ceremony. The whole colony was invited, and everyone seemed excited about the celebration. Nara designed her own wedding dress, combining human and Villani styles. The result was beautiful and unique, just like their partnership. The dress was white like human tradition, but it had flowing lines that reminded everyone of Villani architecture. The morning of the wedding, Minho woke up nervous but happy. He put on his best clothes and went to the workshop to make sure everything was ready for the celebration. That's when he saw the ships. 3 large vessels had landed near the colony during the night. They had corporate markings, and armed security personnel were setting up a perimeter around them. Jiwan's comm unit was beeping urgently when she arrived at the workshop. We have a problem, she said after taking the call. Director Voss from the Galactic Companion Service is here with a corporate security team. He's demanding that Nara be turned over immediately. But the wedding is today, Minho said. Once we're married, their contract is void. That's what I told him, Jiwan replied. He says he's not going to let the wedding happen. Director Voss was a thin man with cold eyes and expensive clothes. He arrived at the workshop with 6 security guards, all armed with energy weapons. Mr. Kim, he said in a voice like ice water, I am here to reclaim stolen property. Nara isn't property, Minho said, standing protectively in front of her. She's a person. She is merchandise that was purchased legally and is now being held illegally, Director Voss replied. You will turn her over immediately, or face the consequences. What consequences? Jiwan asked, stepping forward with her official administrator credentials. This colony depends on galactic trade licenses for survival, Director Voss explained. Those licenses can be revoked if the colony is found to be harboring stolen property or interfering with legal commercial activities. Minho felt his heart sink. The colony's trade licenses were essential for survival. Without them, the colony couldn't buy food, medicine, or equipment from other worlds. You're threatening the entire colony? He asked. I'm protecting legitimate business interests, Director Voss said. Turn over the Villani female and there will be no problems. Many of the colonists had gathered to watch the confrontation. Minho could see the worry on their faces. They were good people, but they had families to think about. If the colony lost its trade licenses, everyone would suffer. Maybe we should think about this, someone said from the crowd. She's not worth risking the whole colony, another voice added. Minho saw doubt spreading through the crowd. These people had been planning to celebrate his wedding, but now they were wondering if Nara was bringing too much trouble. Give us 24 hours, Minho said to Director Voss. Let us finish what we started. No deals, Director Voss replied. She comes with me now. That's when the fourth ship arrived. This one was different from the corporate vessels. It was sleek and military, with the markings of the human colonial defense force. It landed between the corporate ships and the colony, and a woman in uniform stepped out. I am Admiral Chen of the Colonial Defense Force, she announced in a voice that carried across the entire gathering. I am here on official business. Director Voss looked surprised and annoyed. Admiral, this is a commercial matter. Military intervention is not required. That depends on what's happening here, Admiral Chen replied. She walked over to where Minho and Nara were standing with their small group of supporters. Mr. Kim, Ms. Nara, she said politely. I understand you've been working on some interesting engineering projects. Minho was confused. How did you know about that? Captain Rivera filed a report about the repairs you did to her ship. Unprecedented efficiency improvements using hybrid human Villani techniques. The Colonial Defense Force is very interested in new technologies that could benefit human space operations. Director Voss stepped forward aggressively. Admiral, these people are interfering with legitimate commercial contracts. The Villani female is bound property that must be returned to the service company. Admiral Chen looked at Director Voss with cool eyes. I'm not here about commercial contracts, I'm here about the engine prototype that Mr. Kim and Ms. Nara have been developing. What about it? Minho asked. If the technology is as promising as our preliminary reports suggest, the Defense Force would be interested in purchasing the development rights. For how much? Nara asked quietly. Admiral Chen smiled. Enough to resolve any outstanding commercial debts and fund further research. Director Voss realized what was happening. You can't interfere with this. We have legal rights to the property. What you have, Admiral Chen said firmly, is a commercial contract signed under Galactic Commercial Code, but this colony operates under human colonial law, which does not recognize ownership of sentient beings. If Ms. Nara chooses to remain here as a free citizen, that is her right. She's not a citizen, Director Voss protested. Admiral Chen looked at her watch. What time is the wedding ceremony, Chaplain Kim? Yuna stepped forward. 2 hours from now, Admiral. Then in 2 hours, Ms. Nara will be a colonial citizen through marriage, Admiral Chen said. At that point, any claims on her person will be void under human colonial law. Director Voss was furious. This is not over. The companion service has influence throughout the galaxy. We will not let this precedent stand. That's your choice, Admiral Chen replied calmly. But your security team needs to leave colonial territory immediately. Armed corporate forces are not welcome here. As the corporate ships prepared to leave, Minho realized something important. Admiral, why are you really here? This seems like a lot of trouble for one engine prototype. Admiral Chen smiled. Mr. Kim, you and Ms. Nara have done something remarkable. You've proven that cooperation between human and Villani engineering can produce results that neither species could achieve alone. The Defense Force is interested in more than just one engine design. We're interested in the partnership itself. What do you mean? Nara asked. We want to fund a research academy where human and Villani engineers can work together to develop new technologies. You two would run it. Minho looked at Nara and she looked back at him. In her eyes, he saw the same excitement and hope that he felt. Does that mean the wedding is still on? Nara asked with a smile. The wedding is definitely still on, Minho replied. 2 hours later, Minho Kim and Nara exchanged vows in front of the entire colony. It wasn't the marriage either of them had imagined as children, but it was real and honest and built on mutual respect and shared dreams. As they kissed to seal their partnership, the crowd cheered not just for the couple, but for the victory of human values over corporate greed. 6 months after their wedding, Minho and Nara had completed their revolutionary engine design. The prototype was installed in a test ship provided by the Colonial Defense Force, and the results exceeded everyone's expectations. Power output is 40% higher than comparable engines, Admiral Chen reported after the first test flight. Fuel efficiency is 60% better, and the engine produces less harmful emissions. Most importantly, it's more reliable than anything we've tested before. The engine combined human mechanical engineering with Vellani stress flow principles. Instead of fighting against the natural forces involved in space travel, the engine worked with them. The result was a propulsion system that was more powerful, more efficient, and longer lasting than traditional designs. How did you solve the resonance problem? Asked Dr. Sarah Kim, the Defense Force's chief engineer. Every attempt to improve engine efficiency has failed because of harmonic resonance in the power coupling. Nara smiled as she explained. Human engineers try to eliminate resonance by making everything rigid and strong. Vellani engineering uses resonance as a tool. We let the engine vibrate in harmony with the natural frequencies of space-time. The engine actually uses quantum resonance to boost efficiency, Minho added. Instead of wasting energy fighting natural forces, it borrows energy from the fabric of space itself. Dr. Kim shook her head in amazement. This is going to change everything. Ships will be able to travel faster and farther than ever before. But Admiral Chen had bigger plans than just selling the engine design to the military. She had been talking with colonial administrators throughout human space, and they were all interested in the hybrid engineering approach. We want to offer you a contract, she told Minho and Nara during a meeting in their workshop. Not just for the engine, but for establishing a permanent research academy. What kind of academy? Nara asked. A place where engineers from different species can learn to work together, Admiral Chen explained. Human ingenuity combined with alien knowledge. The engine you built is proof that cooperation produces better results than competition. The offer was generous. The Defense Force would provide funding for facilities, equipment, and staff. Minho and Nara would run the academy and continue their research. Most importantly, they would be free to share their knowledge with anyone willing to learn. There's one condition, Admiral Chen added. Any organization that wants to use technologies developed at the Academy must agree to certain ethical standards. No slave labor, no exploitation of refugees, no participation in systems that treat sentient beings as property. Minho and Nara looked at each other and smiled. This was exactly what they had hoped for. We accept, they said together. But Director Voss from the Galactic Companion Service had not given up. He returned to New Sol Colony with legal documents and corporate lawyers, determined to challenge the marriage and reclaim Nara. The marriage is a sham, he announced at a public hearing. It was arranged solely to circumvent legitimate commercial contracts. The Companion Service demands compensation for our losses. Jiwan Park, now serving as the colony's legal representative, was ready for him. Mr. Voss, the marriage is legally valid under human colonial law. Ms. Nara is a free citizen with full rights. The original contract supersedes any local laws, Director Voss argued. The Vellani female was purchased property, and that status cannot be changed by a convenience marriage. Admiral Chen stood up from her seat in the hearing room. Mr. Voss, you seem to be confused about jurisdiction. This is human colonial territory, operating under human law. Your commercial contracts have no authority here. We'll see about that, Director Voss threatened. The Companion Service has influence with the Galactic Trade Commission. We can make life very difficult for this colony. That's when Nara stood up to speak. She had been quiet during most of the hearing, but now she stepped forward with quiet dignity. Mr. Voss, she said in a clear voice that carried throughout the room, you want to know the value of what you lost when I stayed on this colony? 50,000 credits plus interest and penalties, Director Voss replied. No, Nara said firmly. What you lost was the chance to profit from my knowledge and skills. But you never owned those things. They were always mine to give freely. She gestured toward the test engine that was on display in the hearing room. This engine represents the value of free cooperation between species. It will improve the lives of millions of people throughout the galaxy. That is what happens when people work together as equals instead of as owners and property. Director. Voss sneered. Pretty words, but the law is the law. You're right, Admiral Chen said, standing up again. The law is the law. And human law states that any contract involving the ownership of sentient beings is null and void. Furthermore, any organization that attempts to enforce such contracts is banned from operating in human space. She handed Director Voss an official document. This is a formal notice that the Galactic Companion Service is no longer welcome in any human colony or space station. Your ships will be turned away at every port. Director Voss went pale as he read the document. You can't do this. We operate throughout the galaxy. We can and we have, Admiral Chen replied. The Colonial Defense Force has been investigating your operations for months. We've documented numerous violations of basic sentient rights. Human space is closed to you. As Director Voss and his lawyers left the hearing room in defeat, the colonists erupted in cheers. They had stood up to corporate bullying and won. 1 year later, the Kim Nara Engineering Academy opened its doors to students from throughout the galaxy. The academy was built on the principles of mutual respect, free exchange of knowledge, and ethical innovation. Students came from dozens of species. Some were refugees like Nara had been. Others were young engineers eager to learn new techniques. All of them were welcomed as equals, regardless of their background or species. The Academy's motto, carved in stone above the main entrance, was simple: building together, building better. Minho and Nara taught classes together, showing students how human and Villani engineering could complement each other. But they also learned from their students, incorporating new ideas and techniques from other species. The secret, Nara told a class of mixed-species students, is not to think that one way is better than another. The secret is to find ways for different approaches to work together. The Academy's graduates went on to design new types of spacecraft, more efficient cities, and cleaner energy systems. They carried with them not just technical knowledge, but the human philosophy that cooperation was stronger than competition. 3 years after Nara arrived in a shipping container, she and Minho were recognized as leading innovators in galactic engineering, but more importantly, they had helped create a new model for how different species could work together. Do you ever regret it? Minho asked Nara one evening as they walked through the academy grounds. Giving up your chance to find a different buyer, maybe someone who would have treated you well. Nara stopped walking and looked at him with surprise. Minho, I was never looking for someone to buy me. I was looking for someone who would see me as an equal partner. And did you find that? He asked. She smiled and took his hand. I found something better. I found someone who helped me remember who I really am. Around them, the academy buzzed with activity. Students from a dozen species worked on projects that would improve life throughout the galaxy. The sound of different languages mixed together as ideas flowed freely between minds that had learned to see past the barriers of species and culture. This was the true human contribution to the galaxy, Minho realized. Not superior technology or military might, but the simple belief that everyone had value and everyone deserved a chance to prove their worth. In the workshop where it all began, a small plaque hung on the wall. It read, "She arrived as discarded cargo. She stayed as a valued partner. She built a future as a free citizen." The academy had grown beyond anything Minho and Nara had imagined. What started as a simple partnership between two people had become a movement that was changing how the galaxy thought about cooperation between species. Ships built with academy-developed technologies were faster, more reliable, and more efficient than anything that had come before. Cities designed using hybrid techniques were cleaner and more beautiful. Most importantly, the engineers who graduated from the academy carried with them a new understanding of what was possible when different minds worked together. The Galactic Companion Service had collapsed within 2 years of being banned from human space. Other human colonies had followed New Sol's example, refusing to allow any organization that trafficked in sentient beings to operate in their territory. The economic pressure had been too much for the service to survive. Director Voss had tried to operate in non-human space, but word of his practices had spread. Species throughout the galaxy began questioning whether they wanted to do business with organizations that treated people as property. The companion service model, once considered a normal part of galactic commerce, was now seen as barbaric and outdated. "We never set out to change the galaxy," Nara told a group of new students during orientation. "We just wanted to build better engines. But sometimes changing one small thing can change everything." Minho watched from the back of the lecture hall as Nara explained stress flow engineering to the eager young faces in front of her. Some were human, some were Villani, and many were from species he was still learning about. All of them were there because they believed in the Academy's vision of cooperative innovation. After the lecture, Minho and Nara walked home together through the colony streets. New Seoul had grown and prospered as engineers from throughout the galaxy came to study and work. The little frontier colony was now a major center of galactic innovation. "Taman sent a message today," Minho told Nara as they walked. "He's opening his own workshop on Centauri Prime, using everything we taught him about hybrid engineering." "Good for him," Nara replied. "He always was a quick learner." "He wants to use the Academy's ethical standards for his business," Minho continued. "No exploitation, fair wages for all workers, and open sharing of knowledge." Nara smiled. The ideas are spreading. They had reached their home, a comfortable house near the Academy that they had designed together using both human and Villani architectural principles. As they sat on their front porch watching the Academy's lights twinkle in the distance, Minho reflected on how much had changed. "Do you think we've made a difference?" he asked. "Look around," Nara said, gesturing toward the thriving colony. 3 years ago, this was a struggling frontier settlement. Now it's home to the most advanced engineering academy in the galaxy. Students come here from hundreds of worlds to learn that cooperation is better than competition. But is it enough? Minho wondered. There are still places in the galaxy where people are treated as property. There are still corporations that exploit refugees and outcasts. "Change takes time," Nara said gently. "But every engineer who graduates from our academy carries our values with them. Every ship they design, every city they build, every problem they solve will be done with the understanding that all sentient beings have worth." As if to prove her point, a cargo ship passed overhead, its engines humming with the distinctive sound of Academy-developed technology. The ship was probably carrying supplies to a distant colony, its improved efficiency making life better for people Minho and Nara would never meet. "We planted seeds," Nara continued. "Now they're growing into forests." That night, as they prepared for bed, Minho found Nara looking at an old photograph. It showed the shipping container she had arrived in, now converted into a memorial garden at the Academy. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I had gone to my original buyer?" she asked. "Sometimes," Minho admitted. "But I try not to. What matters is what actually happened." "What actually happened," Nara said thoughtfully, "is that a human mechanic saw worth in someone the rest of the galaxy had written off as worthless. That changed both our lives, and now it's changing the galaxy." She put the photograph away and turned to face him. "Thank you, Minho, for seeing me as a person instead of property, for believing in my ideas, for building something beautiful with me." "Thank you," he replied, "for teaching me that the best innovations come from bringing different minds together, for showing me that cooperation is always stronger than competition." Outside their window, the Academy continued its work. In laboratories and workshops, students from dozens of species worked side by side on projects that would improve life throughout the galaxy. They were building more than just better technology. They were building a better future, one partnership at a time. The human gift to the galaxy wasn't superior strength or advanced weapons. It was something much more powerful, the belief that everyone deserved a chance to prove their worth, and that the greatest achievements came from working together rather than alone. In a small shipping container turned memorial garden, a simple inscription told the whole story. She arrived as cargo. She stayed as a partner. She built a future as an equal. And across the galaxy, that future was taking root, one collaboration at a time.